You will hear a number of different recordings, and you will have to answer questions on what you hear. There will be time for you to read the instructions, and you have a chance to check your work. All the recordings will be played once only. The test is in 4 sections. Section 1.
You will hear some students talking about their studies.
First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 4.
Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 4.
It was packed. There simply aren't enough seats in Theatre 4. There were people on the stairs, people in the aisles. I don't imagine everybody was able to get in.
Was Jack with you?
No, of course not. I saw him with a pile of journals in the library as I walked past. You haven't seen him because you've been in here in the kitchen drinking coffee all morning, whereas he has been studying hard.
Not me. I've been in my bedroom reading for my assignment on education in the classical world. Very interesting. It was easier than I expected. I should have been at the gym training for my next race, but that'll have to wait. And did you find your first lecture interesting?
Absolutely fascinating. We talked about this experiment. If you show a child a litre of water in a bucket and show him a litre of water in a tall container, he always thinks that the higher, taller but narrower container has more water in it.
Hold on, what do you show him?
Right. You show him 2 things. A bucket with a litre of water in it, and also a tall glass vase-like thing or any tall container. This also has a litre of water in it. Now, he will say that the tall thing has more in it than the short fat thing, that is, the bucket. And all children will say this, that is, up to about 5 years of age. You can then actually pour a litre of water from the bucket into the taller, narrower container, and the child will still say that the tall container contains more water, even though he's just seen the water come out of the bucket.
And what's the point of that? Is it about measurement?
No, it showed how children are quite unable to think logically. It's connected with my assignment. It's about cognitive development of young children over time. That's to say, it's about how they think. But didn't you do that assignment last year?
No, I didn't. You see, I missed out on the first year when I changed subject.
Before you listen to the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 5 to 10.
Now answer questions 5 to 10.
I started psychology in the 2nd year, which is where I am now.
Lucky you.
I'm not so sure. I've missed out on a lot of the basic stuff like that, and I will have to catch up in my own time, so I'm relying on you.
Oh yes, I remember. What did you study before you changed?
I studied law.
Why didn't you continue?
I found some of the subjects interesting enough. In fact, the criminal area was fascinating in general. But a lot of the law is very technical. It's full of little details which can be very difficult to understand. And I've got a terrible memory too. I could never get all the rules and exceptions into my head. My number one hate really was international trade, which was a minefield of rules and exceptions. In fact, I think it was a complete nightmare.
But law is such a popular subject. Lots of people would like to study it.
I'm sure they would, but they often don't realise that it's very book-based. You spend most of your time reading about famous cases sitting in a stuffy library, and very occasionally you get out to a lecture or maybe a seminar.
What do you find that's better about psychology?
Most of all, I like the experimental psychology we have to study. This involves doing something, so it's practical, and with any luck you can make a small, okay, very small, contribution to knowledge. And it is so useful in many careers, for example, business, commerce, education.
Law is too, you know.
Yes, but the training is so long. You have to spend at least another 2 years on a professional practice course before you can start working. No, I'm happy with psychology.
Well, as a psychology student too, I must say I agree with absolutely everything you've said, of course.
That is the end of section 1. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Section 2. You will hear part of an introductory talk to a health club.
First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 15.
Listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 15.
Good morning, everybody. I'd like to welcome you to Rose's Health Club, which is part of the nationwide Rose Group of Health and Fitness Centres. Today, I hope to tell you everything about the Glenfield Centre and the facilities it offers. First, have a look at the map of the centre I have put up here. There's a copy of it in your information packs. As you can see, we have a range of facilities. We are here, at the meeting point, next to the reception desk. If you get lost, which is unlikely, make your way here. The main feature of the health club is, of course, the swimming pool. This is a 25-metre pool divided into 3 or 4 lanes. Access to the pool is normally through the changing rooms for obvious reasons. To get to these, bear left as you come through reception, and as you follow the corridor, they are the 2 doors immediately to your right. First the female changing room, then the men's. If you follow the corridor right to the back of the building, you'll find one of our most popular features, 3 state-of-the-art squash courts. We keep them in very good condition, so if you're keen on that sport, I'm sure you'll appreciate the quality. Right then, I'm sure what many of you are thinking of joining for is access to the gym facilities and activities like yoga. We've got lots of space for this, and these are all situated on the left-hand side of the main corridor, opposite the changing rooms and squash courts. At the far end, you'll find the fixed and free weights room. There are lots of fixed weights machines, and you'll also find exercise bikes and rowing machines. Next to that, directly opposite the changing rooms, there's access to our sports hall. This is where yoga classes, martial arts, circuit training, and other classes take place. We even have badminton and table tennis sometimes. OK, moving on from the sports, there are 2 other things to point out. One is a small door next to reception to the left as you come in. This takes you into the staff training room. This is important because you'll know where to find us in an emergency, and it doubles as a first aid room in those circumstances. Finally, last but not least, there is another corridor to the right as you come in, and that leads you to the cafe lounge on one side and the viewing area for the swimming pool on the other.
Before you listen to the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 16 to 20.
Now answer questions 16 to 20.
Now, we will go for a little tour in a moment, but first I'd like to tell you a little about the different kinds of club membership we have, so that you can be thinking about what you want as we go round. We first of all have the Anytime membership. Anytime is the complete go-as-you-please membership. This entitles you to full use of all the facilities during all opening hours. And we're open every day from 5 a.m. till midnight. This costs £850 per year, though there are some discounts which I will tell you about in a moment. Don't forget that the Rose Group is a nationwide group, and this membership also entitles you to the full use of the group's other 250 clubs around the country. The Free Time membership is an off-peak membership. This entitles you to use of the facilities between 10 a.m. in the morning and 3 p.m. in the afternoon. Also, you can use the facilities at any time at weekends. This costs £500. Note that you will still have access to a personal trainer under this membership scheme. Finally, a standard membership costs £400 and is a weekday membership really, especially suitable for retired people who can come during the week. There is also a children's membership scheme. Children can join this scheme if they are between 15 and 18 years old. Please note that children of less than 15 can't come to the club without an adult, and they can't take sessions on the sunbed. Not that young people usually want to use a sunbed anyway. The children's schemes are all half price, that is 50% for each child or young person in the scheme. People who live outside the area can have a discount of up to 50%, but this has to be arranged specially with the general manager. If that is of interest to any of you, let me know and I will fix up an appointment for you. Now, let's go on our tour.
That is the end of section 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Section 3. You will hear some students talking about an arts assignment.
First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 25.
Listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 25.
What have you been working on, Arthur?
I've been looking into the funding of the arts by the Arts Association.
Oh, Mr. Simpson gave you that topic, did he?
Yes, it's not too difficult. At least all the facts and figures are easy to find, or I think they will be. I've done a lot of useful stuff already. Simpson hasn't asked me to present my research for the past few seminars, so I think he might ask me this time.
Well, what have you found out?
Well, it's big money at the Arts Association. £330 million from the government and £118 million from the lottery. Let me see, I've got my notes here. Now, the Arts Association mission statement tells us that it exists to develop, sustain and promote the arts. So that's clear. But then we need to know exactly how it can do this. However, before we get to that, there are certain issues which the association must take into account.
What are those issues?
They are, first, access. This is the idea that the arts mustn't be just for the few.
Not just Italian opera, but pop concerts too.
Something like that. Other issues are education, cultural diversity, social regeneration, and social inclusion. All these are different ways of saying that the arts are for everyone.
All right, but what does it actually do?
It does what it wants, I think. The government does not interfere in its activities, but demands that it gets value for money for its funds.
But there must be certain programmes that it carries out.
Oh, yes. There is the touring programme, which is what it says. That is, a programme to support...
Give money to?
Yes, that's right. To support touring companies, for example, dance companies, orchestras, and so on. There is also the recovery programme.
What on earth is that?
It's a financial programme to give extra money to organisations which are financially in a bad way, or which might have financial difficulties in the future. Like it says, it's for their recovery.
It all seems very complicated.
It is.
Before you listen to the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 26 to 30.
Now answer questions 26 to 30.
Did you get any information on the reading for the other half of our work?
Yes, I did. You mean the Art and Society module?
Yes.
Yes. I met Simpson himself as we were waiting for a train at Norchester Station, so I managed to ask him.
Any luck?
Yes, I've got the notes I took here.
Oh.
He told me, of course, to start with Greenberg, who covers contemporary art and the up-to-the-minute movements in America. It's about the modern movements, really. As far as the economic impact of art is concerned, a basic text is the Parliamentary Report on Art and the UK Economy. This gives lots of monetary facts and figures, but the figures are not very satisfactory, as, of course, a lot of the information is confidential and can't be published. Art Now, Art Wow by someone called Dennison sounds exciting, and is about how art and artists are created, presented for buyers, and sold in the US. It's about the whole trade in art as a phenomenon.
Like a product? Like washing powder?
Yes, that's the idea of the book, anyway. And there's another one here. Oh, yes, by someone called Hampton. It's a book called American Art, which Simpson says is full of discussion on the relationship of art to the other aspects of culture, such as film, television, books, and so on.
Popular culture, I suppose.
Not just popular. Culture of all sorts, I imagine. Finally, for the spiritual and more abstract aspects of art, he recommends Art and the Mind of Modern Man by Frick. It's sort of about how art relates to how we think. He did have lots of other recommendations, but luckily his train arrived before he could move on to them. These seem enough to me.
Yes, they're a good place to start. We will be busy.
That is the end of section 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Section 4. You will hear part of a lecture on wildlife.
First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40.
Listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Thousands of exotic plants and animals have been introduced into the British Isles over thousands of years. These newcomers compete with native species for resources and can also cause major changes in the wildlife and in the habitats of our countryside. The problem is not just British, of course, but global, and it has been going on for centuries. One good example of this I'd like to mention today is the European starling. The starling to us in the UK is a fairly ordinary little bird, about 12 inches long. In flight, it appears to be black or grey with tiny white spots. So it's a very ordinary-looking, almost dirty-looking bird. It nests in trees and buildings and can be found in the country and in towns. It travels in large flocks, leaving the nests in the morning and returning in the early evening. It feeds on insects and fruit. Its native range includes the British Isles and Finland, but it is also found in most of Europe and parts of Asia and Africa. In the British Isles and Finland, however, it has suffered a huge decline, and in these countries there is an effort to conserve the species. It is a different story in some of the places where it has been introduced. For example, the population in the USA is estimated at 170 million birds. Also, they are becoming a big problem in Australia and New Zealand. Starlings, as I have said, nest in trees, and it has been found that they are more aggressive than native species, native that is to Australia and New Zealand, when they are looking for nesting places. They therefore compete with native species for nests, and also they drive those species away from nests. So, this nest-building activity causes harm to native species, but also they are a nuisance to humans. They gather in large flocks of thousands of birds and feed together on commercial crops. This causes great financial damage to farmers. And they also make a mess, both in the town and the countryside. There is also the problem that starlings may carry diseases which affect both humans and other animals, although this has not been really confirmed and we are waiting for more work to be done on this. The question arises, what are we to do about foreign species which not only do damage to native species but interfere with human activity? We have three approaches in theory, but usually it is not a free choice between them. Usually we have to do the best we can and that money will allow. The best approach, of course, is prevention, and many countries have passed legislation which attempts to limit or prevent the arrival of non-native species in their countries. In particular, there are many international regulations on how and where ships may pick up and deposit water, and this is a major contribution to preventing the accidental transport of fish and organisms by ship, since accidental transport by ship is a frequent cause of fish and other creatures going from place to place. Ports also have special areas where water can be deposited, and many of them have treatment facilities to kill any foreign species that may establish themselves in their waters. For fish and organisms that live in water, these international regulations are useful, but obviously not all species can be dealt with in this way. Sometimes it is simply too late for prevention. Then we have to consider eradication or management. By management, I mean that we have to decide how best to live with the new creatures and how to keep their numbers down. However, this becomes not only a scientific question, it can be a matter of choice what population level of an invasive species we want to maintain. This choice involves costs. There is the cost of living with the species, and there is the cost of managing the species over time, and species management is usually a long-term business without any foreseeable end. However, there is not just the economic aspect to this question. We can also consider the ethical point. How should we treat animals which we have, sometimes deliberately, introduced into the environment? Is it permissible just to exterminate a number of them convenient to ourselves? The most important decision has to be made in the political forum, whatever considerations go into the making of that decision. These questions are relevant also to the approach of eradication, which is another option, but which does not have an encouraging history. Many attempts have been made to eradicate introduced species.
That is the end of the listening test.